Hello, everyone, and welcome to Reimagine's monthly Candlelight Vigil honoring Black lives. We have an amazing agenda tonight, February 1st, and here's what will unfold over the next 85 minutes or so. We're going to bookend this vigil with a candle lighting and a candle extinguishing ritual. So now will be a good time to grab a candle, a lighter, or some matches. Next, Camille Dungy and Anaïs Duplat, two of tonight's esteemed guests, will be in conversation for about 35 minutes. And for the second half of the program, our musical guest, Keith Tutt, will return to the virtual stage with Reimagine's Chief of Staff, Jennifer Simonson. They will lead us into the honor ceremony in which you'll all get to enter names of loved ones in the chat. It's now my pleasure to invite my teammates, Zubin and Misha, to join me in the candle lighting ceremony. There's a blessing on the screen. We'll each take a turn reciting this, and I encourage you to read it aloud with them. And I will start. By lighting our candles in this time of pandemic, we honor our personal dead, the dead caused by racism, the dead across the world, and all of us who are still here.
By lighting our candles in this time of pandemic, we honor our personal dead, the dead caused by racism, the dead across the world, and all of us still here together.
By lighting our candles in this time of pandemic, we honor our personal dead, the dead caused by racism, the dead across the world, and all of us still here together.
Now, please take a moment to go ahead and light your candles. Thank you for stopping that slide for now, and I encourage all of you to select gallery view on Zoom and go ahead and show us your candles. Take a minute to really light your candles at this moment if you have one. If not, we believe that you'll still be able to share in this moment. But once your candle is lit, go ahead and shine it on the screen at these beautiful faces that are all connected through this journey. At this particular time, we need more light than ever at this moment. And I see all beautiful faces from all over the country, some from outside of the country. Beautiful, beautiful. I want to say a few words about our post-traumatic growth, or PTG. See, here at Reimagine, we've been leaning into the philosophy of post-traumatic growth. PTG is rooted in psychological research. Those who experience adversity and loss can experience strength, optimism, more meaningful relationships, and a deeper appreciation of life, and heightened spirituality and purpose. See, most are familiar with PTSD, but there's another response to adversity and trauma. It's possible to facilitate our own growth or transformation through a variety of actions. That includes learning that it's possible to grow from grief. There's opportunity for transformation through emotional regulation. In fact, we'll experience some meditation with Keith Tutt later in the program. Another domain of PTG is telling your story. Storytelling can be in the form of poetry, music, or simply having a conversation with a listening ear from a sympathetic friend. Finally, it can feel good to perform acts of service. And I'm grateful to our guests who are doing that tonight for all of us. So now it's my great honor to introduce our first two guests, Camille T. Dungy and Anaïs Duplat. Camille T. Dungy is the author of 4 collections of poetry, most recently Trophic Cascade, winner of the Colorado Book Award. She is also the author of essay collections, including Guidebook to Relative Strangers, Journeys into Race, Motherhood and History, and the forthcoming Soil, the Story of a Black Mother's Garden. Dungy has also edited anthologies including Black Nature and From the Fish House, an anthology of poems that sing, rhyme, resound, syncopate, alliterate, and just plain sound great. She is a 2009 Guggenheim Fellow. Her honors include NEA Fellowships in Poetry and Prose, an American Book Award, and 2 NAACP Image Award nominations, and 2 Hurston Wright Legacy Award nominations. She is a distinguished professor at Colorado State University. You can find her at CamilleDungy.com or at Camille Dungy. Anais Duplat is a trans poet, curator, and artist. He is the author of I Need Music, Black Space on the Poetics of an Afro Future, Take This Stallion, and the chapbook Mount Carmel and the Blood of Parnassus. He was a 2017 to 2019 Joint Public Programs Fellow at the Museum of Modern Art and the Studio Museum in Harlem, and in 2021 received a Marion Goodman Fellowship from Independent Curators International for his research on Black experimental documentary. In 2016, he founded the Center for Afrofuturist Studies, an artist residency program for artists of color in Iowa City. He is the recipient of the 2021 Queer Art Prize for recent work and a 2022 Whiting Award in nonfiction, and is a professor of postcolonial literature at Bennington College. You can find him at worksofanais.com or at an.duplan. And so without further ado, welcome Camille and Anne. Before the two of you get into it, I want to ask each of you if there's someone you're particularly thinking about during this vigil, and can you please just tell us about them?
I have a few specific people in mind, but one who's at the forefront is a young family friend named Renata De Leon, who took her own life last year, about 6 months ago. And how heartbreaking it is that we have a world that's that hard for so many. And so she is on my mind very much. And also all the mothers and families of loved ones of people who've lost people dear to them in surprising and also sometimes expected ways.
Yeah, thanks, Camille. I guess I'm thinking about, I've been moving through the process of adopting, and I think much of the larger cultural narrative around adoption is maybe very joyful, or around sort of like the creation of families, but it's kind of an inherently traumatic process for the young people going through it, and is happening because of trauma and grief and loss. So I'm just thinking about that quite a bit. Yeah. So yeah, Camille, I wonder if you'd want to read some poems.
Thank you. I'd be happy to. Maybe I'll read 3 poems, if that's okay. They're all written since the beginning of this new time, I suppose. Ceremony. This one will be in soil. Ceremony. No one can fly down to bury his aunt. The sickness is already there. That's what took her. And anyway, we are stuck at home. The moon swelled, then emptied into its shadow. We learned this week the Black singer died. Days later, the white one. A man in the neighborhood, young father of 4, lifted over the sink. Our child stood on the ledge and cleaned the kitchen window. It is bright outside most days. Grass is greening up the yard. An uncle died. Another aunt was taken to the hospital. The moon swells again. This feels like the early days of parenthood. We swap watch, focus on raising the child. We've seen times like this before, we say. Also, these times are like nothing we have ever seen. When I came downstairs today for breakfast, he was playing Lovely Day, a song we danced to at our wedding. We danced there in the kitchen, all of us, howling those high and happy days. Lovely day, we sang. Lovely day. Oh, lovely day. And of course, I can't help but think about the news and the way that our news cycle sometimes picks up great tragedy and decides that these are, and as they are, the important tragedies to speak to. And that is true. And also every day, and from the beginning of this nation, there have been tragedy. Jamestown, 2019. Poem written on the quadricentennial of the White Lion's arrival at Point Comfort, Virginia, which ship carried the first 20-some people, mostly young, who would begin to build this nation with their bodies, black and blood. Rock the other mother's babies down. Slowly, slowly, slowly. Maybe for 400 years. Slowly, slowly, slowly rock the gone now babies down. You know how a boat rocks on a calm? What rhymes with water, rhymes with dry your eyes? What rhymes with mothers waiting at the corner, mothers waiting at the coroner? These babies, their bodies, they've kept them, hundreds of tears. What rhymes with ocean, rhymes with empty? Tell me, what rhymes with keep crying? I'll give you something. Today, too, somebody's earth brown body baby discovered who thought them no better than dirt. What rhymes with snatch a life and name it building? This burden don't end there. What rhymes with help the mothers love these babies? Help them, help them, help them, help them rock their stolen babies down. And then one last poem. Sanctuary. The way she holds her huge limb forward, patient and expectant, while the slight man untethers the old prosthetic. A cage of metal, polyurethane, and canvas, large enough that I could stand inside. Sweet elephant, waiting as the man sets aside the artificial leg, then turns back to the nylon sleeve that cups her nub, rolling it down like a lover or a mother removes underwear from a body they adore. That gently, that disinterested in causing harm. That dear elephant, steady all this time on her 3 remaining legs, while the man strokes the nub of her mine-blasted one. Its pucker scar a forever wound, that reminds me of the chest of a woman who has refused reconstructive surgery after losing one breast to the scalpel. The scar, like a nipple, stretched into a grin. I want to compare the look of that nub to something you will understand, America. But there's no way to say it other than this. When she was 7 months old, the elephant walked on a landmine. After that, some people wanted to kill her. How could she survive, doubled over and using her trunk as a crutch, leaning always on trees? Put her out of her misery, they said. But look where she landed instead. In this sanctuary, where every few months, as she continues to grow, some people redesign and gently, while she waits, warm, gray, and patient, secure around her blasted nub, a new and sturdy leg. Thank you.
Thank you, Camille. It's such a gift to get to talk to you. I feel like your poems have had a presence in my life and the lives of students, and so it's nice to share space with you synchronously. In the second poem that you read, no, the first one, Ceremony, just a piece of a line. It's bright outside most days, I think. Brought up for me one of the paradoxes that I often experience around grief, which is that life goes on after terrible things happen, and oftentimes, well, all the time, there continues to be great beauty in the world after terrible things happen. So I wonder if you could speak both to how you and the poems reconcile the coexistence of grief with sort of great beauty, maybe specifically great natural beauty. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think it's important to just really center the fact that grief is a product of love, and grief is a product of joy and of beauty and of connection. And so when we honor our grief and when we like recognize our grief, we recognize our love and the beauty that those for whom we grieve and that for which we grieve, the beauty and the joy and the fullness that were brought into our lives. And so I think when I speak to grief, I have to speak to beauty because I'm celebrating beauty.
Yeah, it brings up when I was in perhaps early years of college, a friend of mine passed away, and it was for the first few months, I found myself very angry that there was still beauty in the world. It was like, well, how could that be so? And as you say, I think sort of reframing grief as a product of love can make a huge difference in one's own process. How has your own grieving process evolved over time?
Wow. I feel like the first real true deep grief that I recall experiencing was when my grandfather died, and he had lived with us very near to us, and then actually in our home for several years, and about 5 years. And so his absence was giant. And I was 10. And so it was like, I think that my grief was in fact a refusal to have him completely go. I still have a shirt of his in my closet. Like, and it makes no sense that it's in my closet because it takes up space. And like every once in a while, I'm like, why is that there? But that's decades now of that is still there because he's not gone. And so I think that maybe that was it. It was just, I'm a very contrary person. And so I think that from the very beginning, with my deep grief, it was, well, I will make a space in my continued existence for that person to continue to exist in my dailiness.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's this idea that the end goal of grieving is getting used to not having that thing or person around. And I think that what you're saying really complicates that. And I wonder if we could both kind of think through how to articulate the goal, if there needs to be such a goal of grieving that isn't sort of adjusting to this total absence.
Well, maybe it's that, is that an adjective? Total,
Yeah.
total there, right? like maybe it doesn't have to be a total absence. I think that's the folly. I think the absence is very true, and you don't get to talk to that person anymore, and or smell that person, and part of the like hardest thing of grief is like, oh, I wanted to tell you that. And that's, I think, honey, is that sort of anger that you were
Mhm,
talking about of like, why is there still this beauty? Because I don't get to share it with
mhm.
this beloved. And so it is absence. And it would be folly to say that that's not true. But I think it's that it's not total absence.
Mm.
That as long as I'm still reaching to want to tell that story, or to want to tell others about the love that I shared, then the love's not gone. And that, I mean, that's not, I don't think that's an easy place to be in the moment of extreme immediate grief. Like I'm talking about the grief of distance, right? In extreme immediate grief, that's that's a very difficult
Yeah.
position for your brain to manage. But to even have that could be that is your final outcome, I think, rather than this, oh, you should be finished grieving, you should be
Right.
finished mourning, you should be over. Like, I just think that that's cruel. That's just a cruel way of thinking and expecting people
Yeah.
to be.
Yeah. And, part of me is wanting to talk about how all of this relates to poems, but there's this question I want to ask first around, maybe the related thought to the goal of grief is to adjust to life without that person, is also the idea that past a certain amount of time, it's problematic still to grieve. And in your view, is there a way that grieving can go wrong or be problematic, or how would we know if it were going on too long or it wasn't going how it should be?
Um, I I want to be the last person to tell anybody that the way they live their life is problematic. I feel that's problematic. And I'll just say that I've been thinking about grieving a lot in terms of the garden, my garden. I tend to plant perennials, really honestly, because I'm lazy. So once you get them in and get them established, they do their thing. But I grew up in Southern California, where things are kind of always flowering and always blooming. And it was very difficult for me when I first moved to Colorado to like deal with winter that lasts a long time here. It's a long time. And yet things do return, and they come back, and they come back. Most of them vibrant, some of them don't quite make it, but most of the things are vibrant, and they come back in their own season, and shift and change. And I began, as often as I looked at that recurrence and renewal and return, as often as I looked at that as a statement of the like joy and regeneration and rejuvenation, I also understood it as the way I grieved. The grief comes back, and it comes back cyclically, and it comes back in surprising moments. And every time the irises bloom, I miss my Aunt Mary, like every time. And I think I should have gotten those irises out of her yard when she told me to, but I didn't know she was going to die, and I wasn't going to get a chance. Every time the irises that are in my garden bloom, for now 5 years since her passing, I think of her and I grieve. And I will probably think of her every time I see irises for the rest of my life. Is that problematic? I don't know. Maybe it would be problematic if it meant I couldn't go out of the house during iris blooming period, and it like crippled me from functioning. But if in fact there were like a day or two where I couldn't go out of the house because that grief was so strong, I don't. I think we can live with our feelings. I think that we should. I think that we've lost how many people did we, the US, not to mention internationally, lose to this pandemic still? Like, it's ongoing. How many do we lose to the pandemic of racism? Like, these losses are gigantic. And to say that it is untoward to continue to vocalize and demonstrate our agony because we should be over it, I don't see how that affects change.
Yeah.
I don't think that how it, by affects, I mean how it
Yeah, it
creates
makes,
change.
right. Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, it speaks to perhaps just in that last piece that you were sharing, I was thinking about how, wow, Camille has a really great, as in like vast capacity for holding you must, like, strong feelings. And then I was thinking how cool it would be if everyone also felt that way, or could hold things in that way. And I wonder if the narrative around like, it's time to get over this thing now, or let's stop talking about this thing now, has to do with others maybe not sharing as much of a sense that they can hold big feelings. To what extent do you feel like help is, as a word, is like upsetting me, but it's the only one that I can think of. But to what extent should we be helping people who are having trouble holding grief feelings?
Yeah. Yeah, I see in the comments there are a few people who've said things along the lines and that, like, if the grief becomes physically or mentally debilitating to the point that you causing self-harm, or that like you like cannot function for long periods of time, perhaps that's when it's problematic. And that's also perhaps that's when we can be of service, right? I mean, can there be a time of just entering into the space of somebody who is in that level of deep grief and making a space where they are fed and washed, and the windows are opened, and they know that they are cared for and loved with no obligation, right? It's like, it's not an obligation to pay it back. It's not an obligation to acknowledge it. You don't have to write the thank you notes when it's over. Like, it's simply, we are there for you. We will feed you. We will carry you through this, your own illness, right? Your own just deep suffering. That feels to me like a thing. But I also think that it's important not to, once that sort of period is finished, you know, that's that like nice, neat year of grieving or month of grieving is finished, that you're like, okay, now talk to you later. Like, when people I know have lost beloveds, I like, I have markers on my calendar. It's around this person's birthday. It's around the anniversary of the loss. Reach out, and like years later, reach out, because that, you know, my friend is still grieving and still in touch, and to just know, hey, I remember this is your mom's birthday. Just want you to know you're
Yeah,
loved, right?
yeah.
7 years later, I just want you to know I'm thinking of you. Like, that's a kind of way to be present for
Yeah.
those around us who are in grief.
I hear that in a way as building others' grief into our own lives. And I was thinking about um, the poems that you've written about mortality rates for Black mothers, and thinking about grief on a collective scale. And because I obviously don't have experience with this, wondered if you could just kind of share about the extent to which, when you're writing about mortality rates for Black mothers, are you thinking about that as a kind of community level trauma, and what is the space of like the individual in that?
I think of it in both ways. Black maternity deaths in America are the numbers are horrific, unforgivably horrific numbers of women die in childbirth and postpartum, Black women, and often in really like just unnecessarily cruel ways that, you know, suggest complaints that my leg is hurting, is in great pain. Oh, the doctor can't make it, and then, you know, that's a severe clot. And I mean, when it's a matter of like somebody to the level of Serena Williams experiencing traumatic, you know, postpartum experience that would have killed her had she not been Serena Williams, almost killed her even though she was Serena Williams, right? Like those levels are horrifying. And so I think Serena Williams, there's an individual, right, that I can point to and be grateful that that Olympia still has her mother, and and that we all have that magnificent human in our world, right? And so then that becomes a community issue. I think thinking back to COVID and the COVID losses, the number of children and young people who lost one or both parents or caregiving adults, and those numbers being particularly high in Black, Latinx, and Indigenous communities, right? And so these are already communities that are dealing with all kinds of just need for support, and then losing the people who are your immediate support in huge numbers, again, disproportionately so. And so I think about those dear children as individuals. And then I don't know their names for the most part. And so I can't name them individually, and then it becomes a community grief, right? It becomes a sort of sense of holding and thinking about what, you know, I teach college as you do, and I just keep thinking, and I teach at a state school, which means that these populations will be passing through my classroom soon, right? If Lord willing, they're provided the foundations made available for them to move on to higher education. And how will I, in my classrooms, acknowledge these deep community losses that I feel like I can just expect 1 in 4 students in a state college classroom to have suffered some kind of immediate family loss in my next 5 to 10 years of teaching because of what's just run through our nation. And so I have to be aware of that as a teacher and as a mentor and as a support, part of a support system.
Yeah, and also someone operating within an institution, and you know, perhaps depending on your institution, you might be operating with or against the grain. It was like streams and grains both in my, but you know what I mean? Like the culture might support that or it might not.
Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, like we're here partly as, you and I are here partly as artists and as writers, and I mean, you're like a multimedia, many things, and Keith with his music, and like these are also their tools. They're tools for community building, they're tools for grieving, they're tools for holding. I see in the chat like conversations of anticipatory grief, like what do we do when we know we're going to lose somebody? And when Renata died by suicide, her mother reached out to me and said, I need poems. And it was just like, I just, you know, like I just like went through all the poems that I could think of and just kept sending her poems after poems after poems. And some of them were the poems she needed, some weren't. One of them they read at the service, at the ceremony. Some of them probably they'll never do anything with. But that was her, like, that was a thing the mother needed. And it was a service I could render. They weren't my own poems, but I have access to that knowledge, and I had access to a community of people who I could call and say, what would be some poems that would be useful that I can pass on to this family. Art serves us as a container for all of our emotion, and grief being definitely something that poetry and literature and music and visual arts have primary roles in, you know, sometimes helping to soothe, sometimes helping actually to like reflect, right? Oh, I didn't have words for that. I didn't have a way of describing that, but that sound is the sound of my grief, and that's the music I need right now, right? Like, so, you know, all hail the artists.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you went in that direction, because I was going to ask sort of how does all this translate into poems, and I you've talked in a few different places around poems, their ability to memorialize and remember. And I also think about a conversation I had with the artist Carolyn Lazard. I don't know if you're familiar with them. You know Carolyn? Yeah. And we weren't talking about poems, we were talking about the archive. And they said something like, sometimes they wonder if certain things should be protected from archives in order that they might be forgotten. That would be the more ethical thing. And I think about that all the time, and sort of wonder, like, is there a case where it would be better for poems to facilitate a sort of forgetting or something like this, or what does it look like for poems to forget rather than to remember? And that's maybe very abstract, but it's like it always comes up for me when I think about memorializing. Yeah.
I have some poems that it was mandatory that I write. And also, passages of prose also in that I had to write. And I will never read. I won't read it at a public reading. I don't really return to them once the book is out in the world. And that is like an archive. It's there. So it's there. So it doesn't have to be here. I don't have to, like, inside my head play it over and over and over again, because it's important and I don't want it forgotten. And I want perhaps my child to maybe have access to that information if they need it. I want history to have access to that information because they need it. I want somebody who goes to this place to know to be careful if they need to have that. But I don't need to play that in my own head over and over again. That may also be part of thinking about recovery, like the recovery from grief, or the reframing or the reimagining from it, is like learning where to release our experiences, how to record them so that we can not have to recur the trauma consistently. And so I think that may be one of the roles also of art for me, of writing for me. There's science that backs this up. And when people go through traumatic situations, if they keep journals or diaries or have some sort of way of expressing it, and they get it out of their body and out of their own brains onto the page, their recovery improves more rapidly. And I don't know why that is. That's why they have those scientific studies, but it does seem to be the case. And that's what so much ceremony is about too, right? In cultures where you have like these external ceremonies, where you have an altar, or you have a parade, or you have like an annual festival, that's the time that you like talk to everybody and you do it and you make it out, and then the rest of the time you don't have to.
So perhaps we can think about Black nature for a moment, and then I was asked to share a poem as well, so I'll read a poem. But I have a Black nature, and I recommended it to a student of mine a Black student of mine who grew up. Her family had a strong connection to the natural world, and she felt like there was a real dearth of literature about Black people's connection to the land, as I'm sure I know that you've thought about that a lot. And so we read Jamaica Kincaid, and we read Black Nature, and we read a lot of great books. But I guess I you talked really beautifully about how poems can remember, and in that way you were speaking as a poet. And there are these other times when you've acted more as like a cultural worker or like an editor, you know. And do you see an anthology like Black Nature as doing similar work of sort of remembering or memorializing?
I think one of the most striking things that I heard when I was collecting the work in Black Nature were the artists who said, "Thank you for including my work. I've been doing this my whole life and no one's ever seen me in this light." And to, you know, like, give people their flowers while they're still with us, smell them, you know. The I think to be able to tell people you love them and you love their work, and you see their work while they're here, especially when it's work that has been systemically and sometimes maliciously erased from the canon and from the larger cultural conversation, like that feels so valuable to me, and does end up it does end up sometimes staving off grief, you know, when I then lose one of those elders and I get to, you know, like, and I miss them desperately, and I miss the work that they've put into the world desperately, but then I can know that they knew that at least this child saw them, you know, and loved them. That, you know, I can be sad that they're not here, but I can also feel like I had a role in helping them understand like how valuable they were. And then there's all those other ancestors who are no longer with us, but like the joy of bringing that forward to others. And then yeah, and that's building community, right? Building community will never stop being important to me, and there's so many ways to do that. Look at this, look at all these people
Yeah.
on this
Very cool.
in this conversation. Like, we need each other, otherwise like these things wouldn't happen, and there wouldn't be this many people who would take an hour and a half out of their lives to talk about sadness. Come on. Like, we we need each other. And so being you know, serving as an editor, being, you know, being a professor, like being a parent who likes to have my daughter's children in the home, so like all those things are ways that I can like just do my little bit to hold off, you know, hopefully to help myself in the mornings that it's hard to wake up, right? That it's hard to like understand why I'm gonna get up and get the day, like, oh, because I have this community that I get to go into. But also maybe somebody else in that community can wake up and be like, well, I mean, Camille's there.
Yeah, right,
She's waiting on me for something.
right.
I don't know. Maybe that can help someone.
Yeah. No, it's totally I think about the difference between something like meditating on your own and meditating in a group, and the way that our capacity to be with really like wretched inner states is just totally fortified by being in a group. It's like, this is awful, but at least, you know, it's like I got them and them and them and them, so like I'm gonna be all right. Yeah. Um, okay. Well, thank
Do I
you.
get to hear one of your poems
Yeah,
now,
yeah,
Alice?
I suppose I'll read a poem. Um, One of the people that I think about habitually is my uncle Ale, who died by suicide in my childhood. And he was gay, but sort of hid that or tried to hide that. And yeah, just was never able to kind of live with freedom around that. So this is for Ale. On the beach, and the beach in Chicago means a more urban situation than I've ever held. Two children played in sand, or I dreamt I was in Malden, seeing what Malden was, to feel there. I was overweight and swimming in my body. There were other children in the neighborhood I spent time with each day. We would go in a pack to the corner store to buy candy. My favorites were a goop I squeezed from a tube and pastel yellow and blue droplets in a grid on wax. I missed my father. I ate wax in my impatience. We smashed dry ramen noodles with our hands while the bag was still closed. We were sealed with a moment, not looking down from above, not some feet out ahead, but flush with perception. In each music, a trace. My uncle owned a photography shop near Lekai, where he developed film and made shirts and mugs with people's faces on them. When he shot himself, no one explained why someone might do that. Where does anyone get their inspiration? In writer's block, deep mind tries to keep surface mind safe, which creates a mutating form of hunger, something around the corner. The changeable velocities of thought break barrier. I will not run until it's time. My uncle's mother, the day he died, had heard of his male lover. My uncle and his wife had just married. They'd conceived a child. My uncle transferred his remaining funds into his eldest son's bank account. The present moment can be your mother, whether or not your mother was trying to hurt you. In Malden, on the hood of Bob's car out in front of the house, the phenomenon of clouds moved me. Decades later, in front of a mirror, I see my body for the first time. Attention behind my eyes passes as if my reflection had been made of clay and someone pushed it into a shape I could see and understand.
Wow.
Thanks.
It was beautiful, and it held so much inside of it, so many kinds of grief and discovery, and just like deep sadnesses that some of us have to carry, and that some of us individually or collectively impose upon others also. Thank you for witnessing that.
Thank you for responding in that way.
Amazing. Thank you guys so much. Such a beautiful time to just enjoy this safe space together. I'm seeing the beautiful faces here. This community continues to grow. We are all connected and we are at different places in our journey, but we are helping each other to navigate. And so I really appreciate you all being here. As I mentioned before, I lost my mother in November, and we had the funeral, and my dad, he came up as well to they were not together, but he came to support me as I buried my mom. And then he went back to his home in Georgia and found his wife dead. And so talk about a season of grief and mourning and loss. We were both just shocked, obviously, he more than myself. And at that point, all you can do is just try to be there for somebody the best way you can. We're both at this point of grieving and mourning. It was a tough time. And so I'm just happy to say that tonight, as I look at all the faces here, I see my dad here tonight, who he has joined the vigil. And so, Dad, I'm proud of you. I'm happy to see you. I love you, and we're in this together. And so now I want to welcome our musician for the night, Keith Tutt, to prepare us for the honor ceremony. Keith Tutt is an award-winning producer, professional cellist, songwriter / composer, and master teacher. His musical journey began on the cello at the age of 4. By the age of 7, he was studying with world-renowned National Cello Institute founder Richard Mooney. He has worked with a variety of critically acclaimed artists across multiple genres. Keith was born and raised in Southern California. Lately, he has been exploring the therapeutic power of music, which is amazing. Keith, can you tell us a bit about sonic well and the healing power of sound? Not sure if we hear you, Keith.
Keith, we can't hear you.
Hello? Hello?
Yes, now we hear you.
Okay, good. Yeah, it was amazing what Camille said about sometimes sound just carries all the encoded information necessary to aid in recovery. I've been a professional musician for a while, and a lot of musicians and just people in general know what music does to us. Sometimes it's inexplicable. How deep to our core music can affect us. Um, Coming into the pandemic, it was a very interesting time because I had just come from probably one of the biggest trips of my life as a musician, playing with an artist in Sydney at the Opera House. And we come back home, and no more than maybe 3 weeks later, everything hit. But not only that, there were people that were instrumental in my musical experience that succumbed to COVID early, and it was a very interesting time. But I would go down to my office and I would take my cello, and cello remains kind of like home base. A lot of people feel that cello has a very uh, familiar sound to it that provides comfort easily because it's the same range as a human voice. But I would take my cello down to my office and I'd play. Sometimes I'd go live on Instagram and just kind of share the moment and let whatever was on my heart play through the instrument and out. And with that, my sister actually, came to me and said, "Hey, you should really, really, really um, explore the therapeutic side of music in what you do because you already do it. You just need to actually like really dive in." And so since then, I've developed um, a entity called Sonic Well, and the goal of Sonic Well is to provide once in a lifetime services. Um, Meaning the compositions that you hear won't be played again. It's for the moment, it's for the people that experience the moment, and then that is the end of it. And I think there's a real beauty in that, because moments become precious, and sometimes we get in the way with trying to capture the moment instead of just feeling the moment and letting that moment then pass. So that is the idea behind Sonic Well. And it's been amazing. It's I feel like as poets you guys also experience this when your words carry something way bigger than you could have even imagined. uh and to do these sessions for groups of people and to see how they're touched and how they're moved minus any words just kind of guiding, let the music guide them through their feelings. It's, you know, it really puts into perspective who we are as people and how we are vital to each other's existence. So
Amazing,
yeah.
amazing. Thank you so much, Keith. You can find you can support Keith by visiting his website, keithtuttii.com, or you can find his music at sonicwow.com and also follow him at Keith Tut II. So Keith, you've got us curious now into what this sounds like. So can you lead us in a brief sonic wow experience so we can center ourselves for our honor ceremony?
Yes.
Thank you. That was beautiful. Oh my gosh, that was beautiful. Thank you so much, Keith.
Thank you.
I'd like to now invite Jennifer Simonson, Reimagine's Chief of Staff, to lead us in the honor ceremony with a few reflections. Jen?
Thank you, Chris. As a prefix, Pope John Paul II passed on April 2nd, 2005. My mother passed on April 6th of the same year. Her passing was unexpected. The coroner's report cited that she had diabetes, to which we were unaware of her illness. Several months after, I traveled from Texas to Ghana to the funeral. On the day of the funeral, we sat outside the stateroom waiting for an opportunity to see her. When I finally was reunited with her, a harsh reality overtook me. The woman that lay before me was not my mother. For some reason, no one else could see this, or they chose not to acknowledge that which was so obvious to me. Everyone was crying, hardly viewing the body as they paid their respects. I myself was eventually removed from the ceremony when I questioned and protested the peculiarity of the day's events. Her body had been in the morgue for some months, and I was told that it was quite common for a body to change in these conditions. I began to believe in what I was told and thought maybe I was in denial. There was an internal sense of doubt as we laid the body to rest, but one that I could not shake, regardless of copious amounts of reassurance or simple explanations, was what was happening. I remembered being on the long flight back to the States, thinking that if I was wrong, then I was wrong. But if I was indeed correct, and my eyes and my heart did not fail me, the question that weighed heavy on me was this: where is my mother? A few weeks later, I received a call from my father, who was still in Ghana at the time. He told me, I guess, what I had already knew. There is a custom wherein the elder siblings of the family are to bathe the body of the deceased, our mother. Breaking tradition, they did not do this, instead paying a third party to cleanse and dress the matriarch of our family. I remain numb when I think about this injustice that they caused. However, to add to insult to injury, there was a series of other events that led to this ordeal being of a heavier magnitude. There was a delay in the funeral taking place. The delay probably led to that of about 3 months past the actual death, which was to allow people from overseas to travel. There were 2 bodies that left from a main city to a city within a village compound of some 3 to 4 hours. And although being 2 bodies, each body was actually dressed with the incorrect toe tag. Nobody of family was actually there to see this. When the bodies did arrive, my siblings failed to do what was required. And had they have done what they were supposed to do and not broke the tradition, as is customary in Ghana, we would have known. Nevertheless, it appeared that they were aware, I guess, of the mistake before the funeral. They lied to my father, family, friends, and me, especially those that traveled from afar. The custom is that when a body is laid to state, nobody can see the body until the time that the body is going to be laid to rest. So that meant that the only 2 people that could have seen the body would have been those 2. My father did not see the body. My other siblings, not myself, friends, family. Anyway, I guess 2 years passed before I returned to say goodbye, knowing now that the body in the ground was my mother. But, you know, despite not saying goodbye, the bond between a mother and a child is flawless. A child knows its mother amongst others, and closeness is eternal. This was a direct quote to someone who tried to justify why the mistake had occurred. I can only say that, no, not all people of color look the same. Those words hurt hard, a knife to my heart even now. I mean, even in death, how could someone not know their own mother? She was not insignificant. That being said, I give myself solace in that, okay, she may not have got the state funeral and the firing salute that she deserved, that the other lady did get in her stead. And maybe the other lady deserved that. And I tried to tell myself that too. But my mother, I know, did go with the best when she passed. I do recall it was maybe a week or so before she passed. She was well and of sane mind. And she said to me that she knew that she was leaving with the Pope. Now, this was bearing in mind that the Pope hadn't yet passed as well. So it was really surreal for me to even think back that even back then, she knew her time was coming, but she also knew who she was going with. And I felt that that really has given me a lot of solace, that I could at least help to try to live with what had happened. But, you know, I guess in closing, when I think about the woman that lay before me that day, and thinking that even for her and for her family, and knowing that she had to be buried twice, and knowing that my mother didn't get the dignified ceremony that she was entitled to and she deserved, and knowing that she was a brave woman and she kept her illness hidden from us to the very end, she deserved that much from all of us. The only thing I can say in all of this, and I do say this to myself more importantly, is that never to underestimate the power of saying goodbye or bringing closure to something unimaginable that is entirely incomprehensible. Because when you do not have that chance, even 16 years later, I remain haunted after all that had happened, and it was beyond my control, and it was not my fault. Thank you for allowing me to share that with you. What I would like to do is to move forward. In the chat box on the bottom or the right top hand side of your screen, I'd like you to also join me, and please write the name of a person that you would like to honor, just like I would like to do for my mother, and anything else that you would like to share, so that I may be able to echo that name publicly, so that we all may acknowledge this person. Thank you. David, John Still, Carol Topajan, Charlene Mama Stewart, Paul, James Whitlow, Trish Purdue, Renata De Leon, Marge, Tara Nichols, I apologize, please bear with me, Gladys Lorenzo, Alice Lee, Woody, Mildred Miller, Barbara, Leon E. Fraser, a true community hero. Carl L. Smith, beloved sons Langston, Kyoson, Lohalt, my brothers, Spencer Duncan, Jason Carr, Laurenita, Barbara, Brenda Moore Thompson, Jean Rood, Linda Pastan, poet, Harry Dedenweiler, Huda Mustafa, Fatai Nilkan, Annie Walker, a mother Celeste, Clyde Montgomery, Esther Margolius, Omar Campbell, Brother Chuck, Stephen, Lady Edna Williams, Lord Holt, David Simon, Eileen Copeland, Wayne Favors, David and Kevin, Dennis, Richard Favors, Ty Nichols, Bill Rives, Robin Johnny and Mother Peggy, Silas and Leslie, Andy Todd, Bill Tillman, George Floyd, Tom and Johnny, brothers, Armand Aubrey, Lucille and William Lane, beloved parents, David Blankenship, Carolyn Sharon, Sandra Bland, Breonna Taylor, Breonna Taylor, and Breonna Taylor, and Breonna Taylor, Corinne Gaines, Naya, Atua Jefferson, Connie Ramsey, my mother, Mrs. Mary Ajiman, Elaine Jones, Brother Richard Jones, Johnny Barnes, Michael Brown, Emmett Till, Orlando Castile, Eric Garner, William Cheriboga, Zanu Simpson, Charles Taylor, Rita McGee, Esmeralda Simpson, Lady R. Antonia Robinson. Also, I'd like to say for any names that I may have missed earlier at the start of this session. Julia Gear, for those whose names are hidden from us, Tyra Nichols, CJ Floyd, Alberta Hunter, Norman Lee Dorsey, Kiambi Lane, Ashley Rashon, Loretta Richardson, Tamir Rice, Damon Gerard, for those who grieve and mourn in silence, Carol Addy and his Denise, Tyra Nichols, Martin Luther King Jr., Stephen Gary, Tony Bryant, Roy Harper, Fanny Venado, Frank Bocanegra, Essie Lee Adley, Trayvon Martin. For those who are so dead inside they kill innocent people, Victoria Chetton, a sister, the unborn children that will not see life, Fami Luhana, Leroy Colbert, Betty Jordan, a sister, all victims of racism, Philando Castile, Naya Cartledge, for all of us here tonight, Marjorie Turner, Botham Jean, victims of human trafficking, Marion Setmore, Ina Bocanegra, Trayvon Martin, my mother, thank you. Thank you, Peggy. Dora Mendez-Vaz, who died because her doctor refused to believe she was in pain. Ukraine, unknown ancestors, Somalia, Christina Yuna Lee, for all who mourn, Peru, I would like to take this moment just to pause and to ask you to still continue to put your names in the chat. And I'd also like to thank Keith for his beautiful music as he accompanies me on this journey. Della May, Stephanie Miles, Oscar Grant, for the ancestors who rest in the water between there and here, victims of Asian hate and violence, souls on the call. Dr. George Keaton Jr., Edison Levin, Cindy Lobel and Sammy Yogon, and Wendy Key. The enslaved ancestors, Malcolm X, Melvin Morrison, and I'd like to say also Ada Tillman. I'd like to just say at this time, no more names, please, but we do think of everyone in their thoughts as we continue.
Thank you so much. And that will conclude our honor ceremony. We are grateful for all of you who had the courage to put names in the chat. Even if you didn't, we still applaud your strength and courage just to be here tonight. And so now I'd like to invite our guests to close out the vigil. Together, we will extinguish our candles after Keith, Anne, and Camille recite the following blessing. Keith?
By extinguishing our candles, we release light into the world to keep alive the memories of those we honor today and tomorrow and for the rest of our lives.
By extinguishing our candles, we release light into our world to keep alive the memories of those we honor today and tomorrow and for the rest of our lives.
By extinguishing our candles, we release light into our world to keep alive the memories of those we honor today and tomorrow and for the rest of our lives.
All right, and now you can hold your candle to your mouth and we will extinguish it. If you want to keep it burning, you can. Totally up to you. This is a safe space, and so on a count of 3, we're going to blow out and extinguish our candles. 1, 2, 3. And so with that, God bless you all. Have a safe night. Goodbye.